Now that you've already hooked up your infrared sensor to your Arduino, made sure you had power to the VCC pin, made sure you had an appropriate ground, and took the out signal from the infrared sensor and plugged it into a pin in the Arduino, now we've got to do what it says in the assignment. What I'm asking you to do is that when that infrared sensor is triggered, that an LED be turned on. And what I mean by triggered is when the LED senses that there is something in front of it, it's going to send a signal to the Arduino. The Arduino is then going to decide whether or not to turn on an LED. So let's begin. I'm going to say that I hooked up my infrared sensor to pin 7. So I have to tell the LED, not the LED, the Arduino, that pin 7 is going to be receiving a signal. So we're going to set that pin mode to input. I have an LED that I want to light, so I'm going to put that LED on pin number 9. And that's going to be an output, meaning that I'm going to send out 5-volt signal from that pin in order to turn on an LED. Now, don't forget, when you put that LED on pin 9, that you have a current limiting resistor, 220 ohms. If you don't have one, come and see me. I got a bunch of them on my desk. So make sure there is a resistor between the Arduino and the LED. Now, we're going to comment this. I got to comment this because I'm going to come back in a couple of weeks and I have no idea what pin 7 is. So I'm going to put a comment in here and I'm going to say that this is my infrared sensor. And then pin 9 is the LED. Now there are only two things connected to this fictitious Arduino, but just so I know, IR sensor and LED. So that's all we need to do. Now let's go and get the thing to do what it's supposed to do. First thing we need to do is when we read that sensor. So to read the pin, we're going to do a digital read. And we are going to read pin 7. That will tell us what is coming out of that pin. Now we can read it. That's the same as me asking you to just look at something. There's nothing stored anywhere. So we need to store that information somewhere. So we're going to create a string. The information that's going to come out of that infrared sensor is either high or low. So as far as the Arduino is concerned, it's either a 1 or a 0. That number is an integer. So we are going to create a string that is an integer, and we need to declare it. So I'm going to declare an integer. And the way I do that is I put int, that I'm going to declare an integer, and the variable name, we'll just call it sensor, and that's it. And we'll put a little thing there, and now we have an integer called sensor, which leaves me a little space to put my information. So sensor is equal to whatever the digital reads. So now there's one equal sign, meaning it's assigned. So when I read this, I either get a 1 or a 0. Whatever that is, it's going to put it there, and then I can act on that. Now I need to act on that. If I just go through this code, it initializes sensor, reads it, puts the value in sensor, but nothing really happens. I need to turn on the LED. But when do I turn it on? This is a loop, so this is going to go on forever. But when do I turn it on? I turn it on if something happens. So that's an if. So we're going to add an if statement. An if is a conditional. So if my condition goes in here. So whatever I want to test goes in between here. And what I want to know is if the sensor, I want the LED to come on when something is in front of the sensor. When that happens, there is no signal being sent out by the sensor. The voltage being sent out by the sensor when it's something in front of it is approximately 0.25 volts. And the Arduino will read that at a 0. So if the sensor is equal to, we use two equals, to 0, then we want it to do something. And this is what we want it to do. We're going to put what we want it to do in little brackets. Now I'm going to indent it so it's easier to read. I'm going to put a space, and here's what I want it to do. I want it to turn on that LED. So I'm going to do a digital write. Where's my LED? Well, my LED is on pin 9, so a digital write 9. And high, because I want it to come on. So if we go through this loop, we initialize that, we read this pin 7, assign the value to the sensor. If the sensor is 0, then we turn it off and turn it on, and it goes through. But we never turned it off. Remember, that will stay on until we tell it to turn off. So we need to do either an else or an if. So the next thing we'll do is called an else. If it equals 0, then do this. If it's something else, then let's tab it so it makes sense. Then what I want to do is I want to turn it off. What do I want to turn off? The LED that is on pin 9 and that is low. There. And that would be my code. It is that simple. So let's run down through it again. The void setup tells the Arduino that we are going to collect a signal from pin 7. That's for my infrared sensor. We are going to use pin 9 as an output because we're going to power an LED. That's all it does. Then we go to the void loop, which is our program. We're going to initialize a variable, and we're going to call it sensor. And then we're going to read what's on pin 7, which is the output from the IR sensor, and put that value into this variable called sensor. If the variable we put into sensor is equal to 0, that means that there is nothing, there's something in front of the infrared, let's start it again. If it's equal to 0, that means there's something in front of the infrared sensor. So if there's something in front of the infrared sensor, then turn on the LED that is on pin 9, and we do that with the digital write 9 high. If the sensor senses nothing, that means it's going to send out a signal. So that's not this. So if that's not this, then do this, which is turn off the LED, and there's your loop, and it goes on forever. Now we can check this by clicking the little check marks up there, and it'll compile. On the bottom of the sketch, I see this, and I got that, and everything looks good. So now all I have to do is plug in my Arduino and get it to go. All right, we'll do the next one on the next video.